Part 2. Pillaging Problems. About 600 years after the European monks' first mechanical clocks, a Dutch mathematician and inventor called Huygens made the first clocks with pendulums. These clocks were far more reliable than anything ever invented before. This was thanks to Galileo, who figured out that weights swinging back and forth kept an exact time depending on their length. They could measure time in minutes and even seconds, which allowed for huge advances in science and some important discoveries about the world, like Isaac Newton's theories about how things move and how gravity works. But there was a problem. Going places on ships to discover new lands and pillage all their riches was big business at the time, and pendulum clocks didn't work too well for people on ships because their rocking messed up the pendulum's rocking. Sundials were no use either, because ships move around all the time, so the most common way of measuring time on board was using hourglasses, but they needed an awful lot of them, and they took up a lot of room. This caused big issues, because without knowing how long they'd been travelling for, sailors had no way of knowing where on earth they were. Ain't no GPS in the Middle Ages. Ships located their position on Earth using lines of longitude and lines of latitude, a system that we still use today. Figuring out latitude was always easy. It describes how far you are from the equator, where the most direct sun is, so you can use the position of the sun or the stars to work it out. But longitude, how far around the Earth you've gone in a sideways direction, is all about time. You're either going with the direction that the Earth is spinning in, or against it. For exploring the world and drawing maps, calculating longitude was crucial. As a result, finding accurate ways to tell the time on ships became one of the biggest problems in science for hundreds of years. Around 300 years ago, the government said that anyone who could invent a clock that worked accurately at sea would win a £20,000 prize. That's almost £2 million nowadays. 30 years later, John Harrison won the bounty by inventing the world's first ever wind-up clock, which allowed sailors not to measure only hours, but minutes too. This enabled enormous advances in our exploration and map-making abilities, and our pillaging abilities. But to make the accurate calculations of ships' locations that allowed for all of this, all sailors needed to set off with the same time on their clock. The problem was, because we had no immediate way of communicating between different cities and towns back then, everywhere you went, the time was slightly different. So we invented Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT, which says that whenever the sun is at its highest point above a place in London called Greenwich, it's midday everywhere in England, and all other countries with the same longitude. We chose Greenwich because it was an important shipbuilding area on the banks of the River Thames, and it was already home to a royal observatory that had been set up in the race to make accurate maps using astronomy, looking at the sun, moon and stars. We had already decided that zero latitude was the equator, and now we decided, for the whole world, that zero longitude would be a long line passing through Greenwich, from the top to the bottom of the Earth, which we called the Prime Meridian. And for the foreseeable future, Britain had plonked itself right in the middle of the world map.